Hey there! If this is your first video, my name is Raelan, and let me give you a super fast rundown of my chronic fatigue syndrome, or ME CFS journey. So in 2008, I became incredibly sick almost overnight. I got a really bad virus that essentially just didn't go away for years. I did all the typical things that people do. I went and got all the tests done. Of course, everything was coming back normal, and eventually my doctor diagnosed me with chronic fatigue syndrome. And my first about 1.5 to 2 years with this illness were the worst. And when I look at the scales now, determining severity, I'm not sure these scales even existed back then, but I see that at that point in time, I would have fallen in the moderate range. So I could barely get out of bed, and most days could barely leave my house. The vast majority of time, actually. For example, my mailbox was at the end of my street, at the end of my block, and at least 19 days out of 20, there was just no possible way that I could make it to that mailbox. I was very weak. It felt sort of like there were low levels of poison running through my body all of the time. I had really severe post-exertional malaise from any kind of physical activity or any kind of mental exertion. I had varying degrees of cognitive symptoms. I had severe memory problems at times. I had body aches and pains. I had headaches. I had insomnia. I developed all these food intolerances and probably a bunch of other stuff that I'm forgetting to mention. And what energy I had, I used trying to get well. So whatever research I could manage to do, whatever experimenting, trying new things. And over those couple of years, I spent tens of thousands of dollars trying to get well. And I tried so many different things at once, I'm not even sure what was helping and what wasn't. But I do know by the end of that, about 2 years, I was about 50% better. And I seemed to just plateau there. No matter what I didn't seem to get any better. And for those years, I would have been what would be classified as mild chronic fatigue syndrome. And I've said this in other videos, I don't love the term mild. I get that we have to distinguish between severity, and there's definitely a need for that because this is such a huge spectrum of an illness. But already the term chronic fatigue syndrome sounds like a joke. And then when you put the term mild in front of it, it's kind of an infuriating label. But anyways, my mild CFS was still a nightmare. Life was incredibly difficult. Every single day was a struggle. Every single day, I just had to be so careful. And I crashed all of the time, and I was forever pushing myself beyond my limits and really paying huge price tags for that. So after quite a few years of living like this, I got really tired of it, and I could just see that I couldn't keep going like this. It wasn't sustainable. I couldn't live the rest of my life like this. There was no way. So I decided to put myself in this sort of healing bubble for what I thought was going to be a year, and I just put together a healing plan for myself from everything I'd read, everything I tried over the years that showed promise, and I just really focused hard on recovery for what ended up being about 2 years. And it worked. So after 2 years, I was fully recovered. After 18 months, I was pretty darn close. I was already working out 5 days a week for about an hour at a time. Most people probably would have considered me recovered at that point. But for me, I'd say 2 years is when I was really fully there, which was about a year and a half ago now that I reached that point. So here I am. Now I'm working full time. I work out 5 to 6 days per week. I run, I weightlift, I run this YouTube channel. I have a Facebook group that I run for people recovering from chronic fatigue syndrome. I'll link it in the video description if you're interested in joining. So yes, doing well. So clearly many of the things that I did worked, and in the end, it was a good recipe to get me out of this. The things that ended up working for me to recover was, to start with just doing all the basic things that you would expect to have to do to be healthy in life, like removing processed foods, keeping as many chemicals out of my life as possible. I cut out caffeine and alcohol and sugar and that kind of stuff. Other things that helped me were around diet. So I ended up switching to a whole food plant-based diet, which worked wonders for me. It was a real game changer for me. And then I also started doing different types of fasting, which helped me a ton. So I did intermittent fasting every single day. And then I also did periodic juice fasting, where I'd consume nothing but vegetable juice for 1 to 3 days at a time. I also worked on healing my gut by doing a few different things. One of the main ones being eating lots of food-based probiotics through fermented foods like sauerkraut and kimchi and kombucha and all of that good stuff. And I also did a very gradual movement sort of exercise program that just started out with just 1 minute per day, actually even 1 minute every second day. And then I'd build up to every single day. And then very gradually over time, I'd up it to 2 minutes and then to 3 minutes. So that ended up helping me a ton. I also worked on my mental health a lot, did things like journaling and counseling and meditation. And I did as much as I could to support my body's own ability to heal in terms of things like the lymphatic system, so getting massages, doing stretching, dry skin brushing, hot and cold shower therapy kind of stuff. And things that don't sound super impressive but really did help, things like getting some sun, making sure I was getting consistent, good quality sleep every single night, which was incredibly difficult to manage, but I did find ways to really improve my sleep, and that helped me a lot. And of course, having love and support in my life and having a pacing system and a scheduling system that helped make sure that I wasn't using more energy that I had. So all these things worked really well for me, and I've done lots of videos on this. If you're interested in hearing more about it, I can link some on the screen here. And eventually, thankfully, I did get past this. So all in all, I had about a 10-year journey with ME/CFS before I was finally free of it. And since that time, since I recovered, I've been busy, and I've been doing a lot of things that have allowed me to learn more about this illness, about myself, about other people who are having similar journeys. And there are some things that have helped me to have a lot more insight now than I had back then when I was working on recovering. Things like I ended up writing a book about my journey. Hashtag another shameless book plug. I started the Facebook group that I mentioned, and I interact with a lot of people in there. At the time of this recording, we have about 1,000 people in that group, so I get a lot of input and feedback from people about what's working and what's not. This YouTube channel also has been a tremendous learning experience and given me a lot of insight. Again, at the time of recording this, I've interviewed close to 30 people who have shared their stories with me, with the people on this channel, so I've learned a lot from that. And I also have an Instagram account that I started just for my ME/CFS journey and recovery and health information, and I read a ton and I listen to podcasts and read books, and I'm just constantly devouring information on this topic. So in the last 1 to 2 years, I still obviously stand behind the things I did to recover because they worked for me, but there's also some other things that if I could go back, I would do differently. And I think I could have sped up that recovery time, and it didn't need to take 2 years. If I could go back in time, knowing everything that I know now, there are 3 things that I would have done differently that I am fairly confident would have sped up my recovery time significantly. And as always, this is just for me. I don't know if this will work for anybody else. This is just my journey, my body, my reality. So if this doesn't resonate for you, if this doesn't sit well with what you know about recovery in your own body, just leave it. I put it out there. Do with it what you will. I get that we all have different stuff going on, and my experience is most certainly not going to be everybody else's experience. All right, the first thing I do is I would put way more focus on the brain, on brain health, on brain function, and its impact and its role in healing. And I do this in 3 ways. The first is that I would utilize the crap out of mental rehearsing, just going through scenarios in my brain over and over and over again to rewire those pathways, to change the way my brain signals my body to respond, to feel, to behave. I really didn't fully appreciate how much power our brain has to control our health, to control how we feel, to control our levels of fatigue. For me, it felt like most of it was happening from the neck down, but it's such a massive control center. It makes so much sense now that I've read so much more and talked to so many more people. I'm like, wow, how did I not put this together sooner? So that mental rehearsing, whether it's just picturing things like imagining over and over and over again, waking up the next morning and feeling great, being happy, not being tired, not thinking about my illness, just picturing the state I wanted to be in and rehearsing that to death until those new things were so strong in my brain. Because from what I've read, whether we actually experience it or we just imagine it, our brain really struggles to tell the difference. And we've created all these sort of knee-jerk reactions in our mind where there's a certain situation and then it triggers a certain reaction. So whether it's anxiety or fatigue or whatever. So that is something I would put a ton more focus on. Now, the second thing I do to address brain health is that I would put way more focus on the role of stress. Now, during my own recovery, I did focus on stress, and I did things like counseling and meditation and journaling, but my approach to stress was very much to just deal with it in chunks throughout the day, kind of like your daily workout, and then you're done for the day. And I would have put more effort into finding tools and building skills to help me deal with stress on a moment-by-moment basis throughout the day. Because since my recovery, I've come to appreciate in much greater detail the role of things like the autonomic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system and the sympathetic nervous system, and how one of these systems, when it is engaged, puts our body in a state that it can actually heal. That's the parasympathetic nervous system. But when the sympathetic nervous system is engaged, it puts our body in a state where healing completely stops. And our sympathetic nervous system is engaged when we are stressed, and that fight or flight response kicks in and it floods us with all sorts of hormones like adrenaline and cortisol that do not allow healing to happen. The focus of this system is short-term survival. So you see a bear in the woods and it pumps you full of everything that you need to either fight off the bear or run like hell. Whereas the parasympathetic nervous system, which is sometimes termed the rest and digest system, has sort of equal and opposite batch of things that happen in your body. And that's when all the goodness that we need for healing is happening. So I would have appreciated much more the role of stress and how my not dealing with stress on a moment-by-moment basis was severely impacting my ability to heal on a moment-by-moment basis throughout the day. So perhaps during my morning meditation session, yes, my body was in that healing zone and it was doing great. But the rest of the day, I might have been stressing over a zillion other things, and a lot of my efforts were probably thwarted as a result. Now, the third thing I do to address brain health, if I could go back, would be to do a lot more research and be very open-minded to all the brain training programs out there. Now, I don't even know them all, but people are telling me about them in the full recovery interviews that I do. I'm reading about them in books, and it's just really impressive, the results that they have for some people. I get that it's not going to be for everybody, but I would have at least tried. So I think some of them are things like Gupta and DNRS and lightning process, because the results that I'm seeing, at least with some people, are just so remarkable. And I think this is an avenue that could have really sped up my own recovery efforts. All right, so that's the first thing I would change if I could go back. I would have paid way more attention to brain health and all the ways that I could support my brain and its ability to impact my rate of recovery. Now, the second thing that I would change, if I could go back, is that I would have learned from all the other people out there who have already recovered from this. Now, the reason that I didn't do this is I actually didn't even know that these people existed. My mother had this illness. She had it for decades. I grew up with it. We did a lot of research back then. Then, I did a bunch of research, and in none of this did we ever come up with cases of other people who had recovered. So it really felt like I was attempting the impossible. And watching my mom go through what she went through, I think it put in me a sort of skepticism about a lot of things, about the medical community, about the chronic fatigue syndrome community. I mean, she had such a rough go with this. By the end, she was in a wheelchair, mostly bedbound, and she ended up taking her own life because she was in just such a horrible state, and she had been sick for decades. So understandably, it sort of shaped my mindset and my approach to a lot of this, and I just kind of stayed away from the chronic fatigue syndrome community and just wanted to do this on my own. But now that I have this channel and I've interviewed so many people and I've seen so many people fully recover, people who were much sicker than I ever was, even much sicker than my mother potentially even ever was, I wish I could have made use of all that information, and to see that there are so many different ways to recover and so many different things to consider. And I would have done this through 3 different channels. So the first way I would have done this, the first way I would have learned from the stories of others, and I realize we have a bit of a timeline issue here and this isn't exactly feasible. I would have made use of the recovery story playlist on my channel. I have close to 30 interviews up there with people, many of them who fully recovered, and I would have just learned from them. For one, it would have just been nice to not feel so alone in what I was going through. And 2, it would be a wealth of knowledge for things to consider and things to try. The second thing I would have done is I would have been a faithful reader of my friend Liz's blog. It's healwithliz.com. So for those of you that prefer reading things over video, this might be a good thing to consider checking out, because she features recovery stories, full recovery stories as well, on her blog, on her website, and there's just really great and really clear and detailed information on what those people did to recover. Now again, I know that these people's journeys aren't going to exactly be mine, and trying to mimic everything they did probably wouldn't have got me well, but I could have taken pieces of it. I could have seen what fit, what resonated, and what made sense to me. And the third thing I would have done to help me learn from other people's recovery journeys is I would have hired some sort of health coach. Like my friend Pamela Rose is a fatigue coach, and she is amazing. I wish I had her when I was recovering. I can't even imagine how incredible that would have been. So fatigue coaches or health coaches like Pamela herself has fully recovered. She had years of this illness before she pulled herself out of it, so she gets it. And she probably isn't going to have the answers for me for how I should recover, but she has information. She works with nothing but people like myself who are recovering, so she knows a lot of what's working for people, and she might have suggestions. She's going to be a good listener. She's going to get it. She's going to be empathic. She's going to be supportive, and it just would have been such a great thing to have on my journey. And I do this now with so many things in my life. If I want to be successful at something, I find someone else who is insanely successful at it, and then I learn from them. They become my guru. I do it with my YouTube channel. I have people that I follow, and I am just such a faithful little groupie, and I'm soaking up everything that they say. And I might not do everything exactly the same as them, but I get that people who have succeeded at the things I'm trying to accomplish probably have quite a bit to offer in terms of how I too can get there. So yes, those are the three things that I would do to learn from other people's journeys. And then the third thing that I would do if I could go back is I would have done, I want to say a better job, but any kind of job of just documenting the hard times. I really didn't do much of that. I mean, I journaled, yes, so I have a bit of that, but not even with a real focus, a real sort of deep dive into what my worst days or moments or months or years looked like. A habit of mine over the years is that I don't take photos or videos of the bad times. I don't like seeing myself kind of at my worst. And even if I unintentionally take photos or videos that I feel are unflattering, or I'm just at all, they make me feel in some kind of way that is not good, I just delete it. And if I could go back, I would change that. I would document my journey, and what I would do with all that documentation down the road would be completely up to me. Maybe I'd share it with others, maybe I'd keep it to myself, but at least I'd have it. It turns out that once I did get past this, I became very passionate about sharing my journey with other people in writing a book, my Instagram account, my YouTube channel, my Facebook group, and all of this stuff would have been really helpful to really, show to other people what it was like for me, and for me to remember, and for me to get back there and see what it was like. So I would document those tough times, and I do that in 3 ways. The first would be a vlog. I think video is incredibly powerful. Some sort of video log of my journey, of the really horrible times, and I would just take my phone, put it on selfie mode, hold it up to my face, me with no makeup on, greasy hair, ugly clothes, looking terrible, feeling terrible, and I would just talk. I wouldn't plan it, I wouldn't script it, I wouldn't worry about what I sounded like. I would just speak my truth of what was happening to me in that moment. And I would do it this way, not this way. Video this way, not so useful for things other than Instagram stories, if you do want to share them one day. And the second thing I do to document those tough times is I would take a ton of photos. I don't have a single photo of me not doing well. And it's understandable that I didn't feel like taking them, but now I wish I had. It would just be so nice to see how far I've come. It would be nice to share my story in a way that was perhaps more impactful because people could see those times. It's probably hard to imagine me seeing me now, that I ever was truly struggling and in the depths of hell and so low. I would take photos of me overweight and out of shape and looking terrible and bad skin and all of it. And again, maybe I show no one. Maybe I never look at them again, but at least I have them. And the third thing I do to document those tough times is I'd actually keep a journal specific for those rough times. Now, I'm a big fan of being positive and keeping your focus on recovery and gratitude and all that good stuff, but I think there is value also in just taking some moments where you just get really real with yourself and you just dive into, like, this is what my hell looks like right now. This is what it feels like. This is what it looks like. And I wouldn't spend too much time there. I think that could be probably unhealthy. We don't want to put too much focus on that, but I do wish I would have spent more time really just spelling out what that all looked like and felt like for me. So there you go. That's the 3 things that I would do if I could go back in time. So I hope you found something in here useful or helpful, and if so, consider giving this video a thumbs up and subscribing. I have recently just committed to a new schedule for this channel. I'm going to put out a new video every single week on Monday morning. So every week, without fail, there will be a new video up Monday mornings. And then some weeks when I have some extra content available to put out, I'll put out a second video later on in the week. But at the very least, there will be that Monday morning video every single week. And it's all about health and happiness with a focus on chronic fatigue syndrome or ME/CFS recovery. And if you want to get notifications when new videos come out, you just click that bell underneath the video, and that way you'll never miss when a new video comes out. And as always, I'm sending love and support in whatever way that I can to those of you who are watching. And please leave a comment if you have any questions. I'd love to chat with you more there. I'm wishing you all the best with whatever it is that you're facing. I know it can be tough, but hang in there. One day at a time, one baby small change at a time, and you will get there.